Welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. Thank you for tuning in. We've got another gripping story for you today, and we hope it keeps you entertained. Let's not wait any longer. Let's dive into the story. Alejandro Joyce's phone buzzed during the project meeting. He glanced at the screen, saw Casey's name, and felt a prickle of unease. The message was short but ominous. "Call me ASAP. It's about Heather." He excused himself, his mind racing as he stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights seemed harsh suddenly, matching the tension in his gut. He dialed Casey's number. "What's going on?" Alejandro asked, his voice low and controlled. Casey's response was grim. "I saw Heather in Miami. With Blake Kelly. They were intimate. On the beach." Alejandro's world tilted. He gripped the phone tighter, willing his voice to remain steady. "You're sure?" "Positive." "I'm sorry, man. Thanks for telling me," Alejandro said, his mind already shifting gears. "I need to get back to my meeting." He ended the call and took a deep breath. The betrayal burned, but he pushed it down. There was work to be done. He straightened his tie and walked back into the conference room, face impassive. That evening, Alejandro arrived home to find Heather in the kitchen. She looked up from her phone, a practiced smile on her face. "How was your trip?" he asked casually, watching her closely. Heather launched into a detailed account of boring conferences and late nights at the hotel bar. Her lies flowed effortlessly, each one a fresh cut. Alejandro simply nodded, his face a mask of neutrality. "Sounds exhausting," he said finally. "I've got some work to finish up." He retreated to his home office, locking the door behind him. Only then did he allow himself a moment of rage, his fists clenching as he fought the urge to put them through the wall. But no, control was key now. He had moves to make. Over the next few weeks, Alejandro became a master of compartmentalization. By day, he threw himself into his work, impressing his superiors with his dedication to a high-stakes flood control project. His colleagues marveled at his focus, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. At night, he meticulously gathered evidence. Simon Bullock, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion, proved his worth. His reports painted a damning picture. A long-standing affair, complete with time-stamped photos and videos that made Alejandro's stomach churn. Meanwhile, Heather grew bolder. Her late nights at the office became more frequent. She treated Alejandro with thinly veiled contempt, secure in her belief that he remained oblivious. If she noticed the hardening in his eyes, she gave no sign. Their son, Adam, was caught in the crossfire. The tension in the house was palpable, and Alejandro saw the confusion and worry in the boy's eyes. It took every ounce of self-control not to tell Adam the truth, to expose Heather for what she was. But Alejandro knew better. He maintained a facade of normalcy, shielding his son as best he could. One evening, as Adam headed up to bed, Alejandro caught him looking back and forth between his parents. The boy's brow was furrowed, his young face etched with concern. Alejandro felt a surge of protective anger. Heather's betrayal was bad enough, but to rob their son of his sense of security? That was unforgivable. Alejandro knew he needed expert advice. He arranged a meeting with Guillermo Potts, a divorce attorney known for his shrewd tactics. They met in a nondescript coffee shop, far from prying eyes. Guillermo listened intently as Alejandro laid out the situation, nodding occasionally. When Alejandro finished, the lawyer leaned back, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "You've done well," Guillermo said. "Most clients come to me in a blind rage. You've kept your head and gathered solid evidence. That gives us options." Together, they crafted a meticulous strategy. Asset protection was key, as was securing primary custody of Adam. Guillermo outlined the legal maneuvers they'd need to make, his tone businesslike, but with an undercurrent of determination. He recognized in Alejandro a client worth fighting for. As they wrapped up, Guillermo fixed Alejandro with a steady gaze. "Some men in your position, they try to forgive." Alejandro's response was immediate and cold. "There's nothing to forgive. Only actions and consequences." Guillermo nodded, satisfied. They shook hands, two professionals united in a common cause. The next step was harder. Alejandro reached out to his sister, Joanna, a child psychologist. They met for lunch, and he could see the concern in her eyes as soon as she sat down. "What's wrong?" she asked, cutting straight to the chase. Alejandro took a deep breath and told her everything. Joanna listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger to sorrow. When he finished, she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry, Alej," she said softly. Then, her voice hardening, "What do you need from me?" "Advice," Alejandro replied, "on how to minimize the impact on Adam. And I may need your help preparing him for what's coming." Joanna nodded, her professional demeanor taking over. "We'll need to be careful. Create a support system for him. I can help with that and with strategies for talking to him." They spent the next hour discussing approaches, potential pitfalls, and ways to shield Adam from the worst of the fallout. As they parted, Joanna hugged her brother tightly. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. "Stay strong." With his legal and familial support in place, Alejandro turned his attention to practical matters. He began quietly transferring assets, setting up new accounts that Heather couldn't access. He rented a nearby apartment, furnished it comfortably, making sure it would feel like a home for Adam. All the while, he maintained his facade at home. He engaged in small talk with Heather, attended Adam's soccer games, and even suffered through a dinner party with Heather's insufferable colleagues, including Blake Kelly. Watching Heather and Blake interact, their stolen glances and inside jokes, Alejandro felt a cold rage building inside him. But he channeled it, used it to fuel his resolve. Every smirk, every casual touch was another nail in the coffin of his marriage. As he helped clean up after the party, Heather sidled up to him in the kitchen. She was slightly drunk, her inhibitions lowered. "You've been so distant lately," she purred, running a hand down his arm. "Is everything okay?" Alejandro looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the woman he had loved, the mother of his child, and he saw a stranger, someone capable of breathtaking deceit. He gently removed her hand. "Just tired," he said. "Big project at work." Heather's eyes narrowed slightly, but she quickly covered it with a smile. "Poor baby," she cooed. "Why don't you come to bed? I'll help you relax." For a moment, Alejandro was tempted, not by desire, but by the urge to confront her, to throw her infidelity in her face. But no, the time wasn't right. He had to think of Adam. "Thanks," he said, forcing a smile. "But I've got an early meeting. I'm going to crash in the guest room." He saw the flash of anger in her eyes, quickly masked. She shrugged, affecting nonchalance. "Suit yourself." As he lay in the guest bed that night, Alejandro stared at the ceiling. He thought about the life he had built, the promises made and broken. He thought about Adam, innocent and unaware of the storm about to break. And he thought about the future, uncertain but necessary. Sleep eluded him, but that was okay. He had work to do, plans to finalize. The next move was Heather's, and he would be ready. In the quiet of the night, as his soon-to-be ex-wife slept in their marital bed, Alejandro Joyce steeled himself for the battle ahead. He was a man betrayed, but not broken, and he would make damn sure that when the dust settled, he and Adam would emerge stronger than ever. The wheels were in motion. There was no going back now. Alejandro Joyce sat at his desk, staring at the flight itinerary on his computer screen. The fabricated emergency project in Alaska was taking shape, a carefully constructed lie that would give him the time and space he needed to execute his plan. He hit print and leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a small, grim smile. Heather's voice floated up from downstairs, saccharine sweet as she talked on the phone. Probably to Blake, Alejandro thought, his jaw tightening. He took a deep breath, forcing his features into a neutral expression before heading downstairs. "Hey," he said, waving the printout. "Got a minute?" Heather ended her call quickly, her eyes darting to the paper in his hand. "What's up?" "Emergency project in Alaska. I'll be gone for 2 weeks." The flash of excitement in Heather's eyes was quickly masked by a practiced look of concern. 2 weeks? That's a long time. What about Adam? Alejandro shrugged. "You'll manage. It's a big opportunity for the firm. I can't pass it up." Heather nodded, her mind clearly already racing with possibilities. "Of course. We'll be fine. When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning. Early flight." As Alejandro turned to go, Heather called out, "I'll miss you." He paused, not turning back. "Yeah, me too." The next morning, Alejandro left the house before dawn, suitcase in hand. He drove to his new apartment, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders as he closed the door behind him. The place was sparsely furnished but comfortable. More importantly, it was his. A fresh start. He set up his laptop on the kitchen counter, connecting to the feed from the hidden cameras he'd installed in the house. It felt invasive, but necessary. He needed irrefutable proof of Heather's betrayal. It didn't take long. That very evening, Blake's car pulled into the driveway. Alejandro watched as Heather greeted him at the door, pulling him into a passionate kiss before they'd even made it inside. His stomach churned, but he forced himself to keep watching. Over the next few days, Alejandro split his time between monitoring the feeds and preparing for the fallout. He met with Adam's teachers, explaining that he and Heather were going through a separation. He emphasized the need for stability and support for Adam during this time. Mrs. Thompson, Adam's math teacher, looked at Alejandro with sympathy. "Adam's a great kid. We'll keep an eye on him, make sure he's doing okay." Alejandro nodded gratefully. "I appreciate that. I'm trying to minimize the impact on him, but these things are never easy," Mrs. Thompson finished. "Don't worry, Mr. Joyce. We've got your back." Similar conversations with Adam's other teachers and his soccer coach left Alejandro feeling more confident. He was building a support network for his son, preparing for the storm to come. Meanwhile, the footage from the house grew increasingly damning. Heather and Blake's behavior became more reckless and disrespectful with each passing day. They lounged by the pool, drank Alejandro's expensive whiskey, even slept in the master bedroom. One evening, Alejandro watched as they sat at the dining room table, laughing over takeout. "God, it's so nice not having to pretend," Heather said, refilling their wine glasses. "Alejandro's so boring. Always working, always serious." Blake smirked. "Well, someone's got to pay for this nice house." They laughed, clinking glasses. Alejandro's hand tightened on his mouse, the plastic creaking under the pressure. He forced himself to relax. Soon they'd pay for every moment of disrespect. The day before his supposed return, Alejandro met Joanna at a cafe near Adam's school. His sister looked worried, but determined. "You positive about this, Alej?" she asked. "It's going to be hard on Adam." Alejandro nodded. "I'm sure. He deserves the truth, and I need him to understand why things are going to change." Joanna reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Okay, I've prepared some materials, age-appropriate ways to explain what's happening. Just let him set the pace, okay? Don't push too hard." "I won't," Alejandro promised. He checked his watch. "It's time." They drove to Adam's school in silence. As they waited in the parking lot, Alejandro felt a mix of dread and determination. This would be hard, but necessary. Adam emerged from the building, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He spotted Alejandro's car and broke into a run, his face lighting up. It made Alejandro's heart ache. "Dad!" Adam exclaimed as he climbed into the back seat. "You're back early." "I thought," he broke off, noticing Joanna. "Aunt Jo? What's going on?" Alejandro met his son's eyes in the rearview mirror. "We need to talk, buddy. It's important." They drove to a nearby park, finding a quiet spot away from the playground. Adam's excitement had faded, replaced by nervous energy. He kept glancing between Alejandro and Joanna, clearly sensing the gravity of the situation. Alejandro knelt in front of his son, taking a deep breath. "Adam, you know how things have been. Tense at home lately?" Adam nodded slowly. "You and Mom have been fighting. Or, not fighting, but it feels like you're always angry." "You're right," Alejandro said softly. "And I owe you an explanation. Your mom, she's been lying to us. She's been spending time with someone else, someone who isn't part of our family." Adam's brow furrowed. "Like a friend?" Alejandro shook his head. "No, buddy. More than a friend. She's been romantic with this person. Do you understand what that means?" Adam's eyes widened, then filled with tears. "She has a boyfriend? But you're married." "I know," Alejandro said, fighting to keep his voice steady. What she's doing is wrong. It's called cheating, and it hurts our family. Adam launched himself into Alejandro's arms, sobbing. Alejandro held him tight, meeting Joanna's gaze over Adam's shoulder. She nodded encouragingly, mouthing, "You're doing great." When Adam's tears subsided, Alejandro gently pulled back. "I need to show you something, okay? It might be hard to see, but I think it's important that you understand what's happening." He pulled out his phone, bringing up a carefully edited video compilation. It showed Heather and Blake together, their intimacy obvious even in the G-rated clips Alejandro had selected. Adam watched in silence, his young face a mix of confusion, hurt, and anger. "That's Mr. Kelly," he said finally. "From Mom's work." Alejandro nodded. "Yes, they've been spending a lot of time together." Adam was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, he asked, "What's going to happen now?" Alejandro took a deep breath. "Well, that's part of why we're here. Things are going to change, Adam. Your mom and I, we can't be married anymore. Not after this. I'm going to move out, and you'll split your time between us." To Alejandro's surprise, Adam looked almost relieved. "Is that why you got the new apartment? I saw the lease in your office." Alejandro blinked, then chuckled softly. "You're observant, aren't you?" "Yes, that's why. I wanted to have a place ready for us." Adam nodded, then asked hesitantly, Can I come with you? I don't want to stay with Mom right now." Alejandro felt a surge of love and protectiveness. "Of course you can, buddy. In fact, that's the plan. We're going to go home, pack up some of your things, and then head to the new place. But first," he paused, making sure he had Adam's full attention. "I need to talk to your mom and Mr. Kelly. It might get intense. I want you to go up to your room and pack, okay? Don't come down until I call for you." Adam nodded solemnly. "Okay, Dad. I love you." Alejandro pulled him into another hug. "I love you too, Adam. More than anything." As they drove home, Alejandro felt a calm settle over him. The hard part was done. Adam knew the truth, and he was on board with the plan. Now, it was time for the confrontation he'd been planning for weeks. Blake's car was in the driveway when they arrived. "Perfect." Alejandro turned to Adam. "Remember the plan. Okay? Go straight to your room and start packing. I'll come get you when it's time to go." Adam nodded, his jaw set in a determined expression that mirrored Alejandro's own. As they entered the house, Adam headed upstairs while Alejandro made his way to the back patio. Heather and Blake were lounging by the pool, drinks in hand. They both froze when they saw Alejandro, their faces a comical mix of shock and fear. "Alejandro," Heather exclaimed, scrambling to her feet. You're home early." Alejandro smiled coldly. Evidently, Blake stood up, trying to project confidence. "Now, Alejandro, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" Alejandro interrupted. "Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with her boss in my home. Please, enlighten me as to what it actually is." Heather's shock was morphing into anger. "How dare you spy on me? This is an invasion of privacy." Alejandro laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Privacy? In my house? Paid for with my money? That's rich, Heather. Almost as rich as the evidence I've collected over the past 2 weeks." He pulled out his phone, playing a greatest hits compilation of their affair. Heather and Blake watched in growing horror as their own voices filled the air, damning them with every word. "You had no right," Heather hissed, but her bravado was crumbling. "I had every right," Alejandro countered. "As your husband, as Adam's father, I had every right to protect my family from your selfish actions." Blake, sensing the tide turning, tried to distance himself. "Heather, I think I should go." "Oh no," Alejandro said, his voice dangerously calm. "You're going to want to stick around for this next part." He pulled out a thick envelope, tossing it onto the patio table. "Divorce papers, Heather. I'm sure you'll find the terms." Illuminating, Heather snatched up the envelope, her hands shaking as she read. Her face paled. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly think a judge would agree to this." "Oh, I think they will," Alejandro said. especially when they see the evidence of how you've been misusing company funds to finance your little trysts. Blake's head snapped up. What? Alejandro smirked. Oh yes, your little creative accounting caught my eye. Hotel rooms, flights, gifts, all charged to the company card. This K. Blake turned on Heather. You said those charges were approved. Do you have any idea what this could do to my career? Heather's composure finally broke. I didn't think. That's obvious. Alejandro cut in. You didn't think about anything but yourselves. Not about me, not about Adam, not about your jobs or your reputations. As if on cue, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Adam appeared in the doorway, a packed bag in his hand. His young face was a mask of hurt and disappointment as he looked at his mother. Adam, Heather breathed. Baby, I can explain. Don't bother, Adam said, his voice small but firm. I don't want to hear it. He walked over to Alejandro, taking his father's hand. Alejandro squeezed it gently, a silent show of support. We're leaving now, Alejandro said. Adam will be staying with me for the foreseeable future. Your lawyer can contact mine about visitation. As they turned to go, Heather called out, her voice breaking. Alejandro, please. We can talk about this. We can work it out. Alejandro paused, looking back at the woman he had once loved. Now, all he felt was pity and disgust. There's nothing to work out, Heather. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. He and Adam walked out of the house, leaving Heather and Blake to face the wreckage of their choices. As they drove away, Adam reached over and squeezed Alejandro's hand. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. They were in this together. Alejandro felt tears prick his eyes, but he blinked them away. There would be time for emotion later. Right now, he needed to be strong for his son. They had a new life to build, and he was determined to make it a good one. As they pulled up to the apartment building, Adam looked up at it with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Is this home now? He asked. Alejandro nodded. For now, buddy. It's a fresh start for both of us. Adam was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm glad I'm with you, Dad. Alejandro felt his heart swell. Despite everything, despite the pain and betrayal, he knew in that moment that they were going to be okay. They had each other, and that was what mattered most. Heather Joyce sat in the plush office of Bridget Hawthorne, her newly hired attorney. The room reeked of expensive leather and desperation. Heather's once perfect manicure was chipped, her designer outfit wrinkled. She'd spent the last week alternating between crying jags and rage-fueled tirades. Bridget, a shark in a tailored suit, studied the divorce papers with narrowed eyes. This is quite the scorched earth approach your husband's taken. Heather's laugh was bitter. That's Alejandro for you. Always so thorough. We can work with this, Bridget said, a predatory gleam in her eye. Paint him as controlling, emotionally abusive. The courts eat that up these days. But he wasn't, Heather began, then caught herself. I mean, yes. Of course. He was terrible. Bridget's smile was cold. That's the spirit. Now, tell me everything. And I do mean everything. We need ammunition. Across town, Alejandro sat with Guillermo Potts in a far less ostentatious office. The walls were lined with law books, the desk cluttered with case files. It spoke of a man who prioritized results over appearances. She's hired Bridget Hawthorne, Guillermo said, his tone grim. Woman's a pit bull. Specializes in high-conflict divorces. Alejandro nodded, unsurprised. I expected as much. Heather's never been one to go down without a fight. They'll try to smear you, Guillermo warned. Paint you as the villain. Let them try, Alejandro replied, his voice steel. We have the truth on our side, and the evidence to back it up. Guillermo grinned, a fierce expression. That we do. I've subpoenaed Adam's teachers for character statements. And those financial records you dug up? Pure gold. As they pored over their strategy, Alejandro felt a mix of sadness and resolve. This wasn't how he'd imagined his marriage ending, but he'd be damned if he'd let Heather's betrayal destroy him or harm Adam. The legal battle raged for weeks. Heather and Bridget launched a media blitz, portraying Alejandro as a cold, controlling husband who drove Heather into another man's arms. They conveniently glossed over the fact that the other man was her married boss. Alejandro maintained a dignified silence in public, letting Guillermo handle the press. In private, he focused on Adam, ensuring his son felt secure and loved amid the chaos. One evening, as they prepared dinner in their new apartment, Adam looked up from chopping vegetables. "Dad, are you okay? I saw what they're saying about you on TV." Alejandro set down his spatula, kneeling to meet Adam's eyes. "I'm fine, buddy. People say all sorts of things during divorces. What matters is that you know the truth." Adam nodded solemnly. "I do. Mom's lying. Again." The simple statement, delivered with such certainty, nearly broke Alejandro's heart. He pulled Adam into a hug, marveling at his son's resilience. The turning point came during a heated court session. Bridget was in rare form, painting Alejandro as a workaholic who neglected his family. Heather sat beside her, the picture of a wronged woman, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Guillermo let them talk themselves out. Then, with surgical precision, he began dismantling their case. First came Adam's teachers. One by one, they testified to Alejandro's active involvement in his son's life. Mrs. Thompson, Adam's math teacher, was particularly effusive. Mr. Joyce attends every parent-teacher conference, volunteers for field trips, and even helped set up our new computer lab, she said. Meanwhile, "I've never even met Mrs. Joyce." Heather shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Bridget tried to spin the testimony. But it only got worse. Next came the financial records. Guillermo presented a damning trail of evidence showing how Heather had misused company funds to finance her affair with Blake. Hotel receipts, plane tickets, expensive gifts, all charged to the corporate account. "Your Honor," Guillermo said, his voice ringing with righteous indignation, "Mrs. Joyce didn't just betray her husband. She committed fraud against her employer to subsidize her infidelity." The judge's expression grew increasingly disgusted as the evidence mounted. By the time Guillermo rested his case, the outcome was clear. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, the judge declared, "I'm granting Mr. Joyce's petition for divorce on the grounds of adultery. Furthermore, I'm awarding him primary custody of the minor child, Adam Joyce, with Mrs. Joyce granted supervised visitation pending a full evaluation." Heather's wail of outrage was cut short by Bridget's hand on her arm. Alejandro remained stoic, but inside, he felt a wave of relief. It was over. They had won. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Guillermo fielded most of the questions, but one persistent journalist managed to get Alejandro's attention. "Mr. Joyce, how do you feel about the verdict?" Alejandro paused, considering his words carefully. "I'm grateful that the truth has come to light. My only concern now is providing a stable, loving home for my son." With that, he strode away, leaving the media frenzy behind. There was still work to be done. The fallout from the divorce proceedings spread quickly. Heather and Blake's company launched an internal investigation, horrified by the evidence of financial misconduct that had come to light during the trial. Blake sat in the sterile conference room, facing a panel of grim-faced executives. His once immaculate suit was rumpled, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. "Mr. Kelly," the CEO began, his tone icy, "would you care to explain these expenses?" Blake swallowed hard, his mind racing. He could throw Heather under the bus, claim she had manipulated the accounts without his knowledge. But one look at the stack of evidence before him, and he knew it was hopeless. I can explain," he began weakly. The CEO cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it for the authorities, Mr. Kelly. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." As Blake was led from the building, his personal effects in a cardboard box, he caught sight of Heather being escorted out as well. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of shared despair, before they were ushered into separate cars. Word spread quickly through professional circles. Blake and Heather found themselves persona non grata, their reputations in tatters. Job applications went unanswered. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid them. The price of their betrayal was steep indeed. Meanwhile, Alejandro's star was on the rise. His flood control project, completed despite the personal turmoil, was hailed as a breakthrough in urban planning. At the project's unveiling, he stood tall, accepting accolades with quiet dignity. His boss, a gruff man not given to effusive praise, clapped him on the shoulder. "Damn fine work, Joyce. Don't know how you managed it with everything going on, but you pulled it off." Alejandro nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "Thank you, sir. I had good motivation to stay focused." The promotion came as no surprise to anyone but Alejandro himself. As he settled into his new office, he felt a mix of pride and melancholy. He'd achieved a long-held professional goal, but the personal cost had been high. A knock at the door interrupted his musings. It was Carla, a fellow engineer he'd worked with on the flood project. She smiled, holding up a bottle of champagne. "Thought you might want to celebrate," she said. "You've more than earned it." Alejandro hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Come in. I could use a friend right now." As they talked, Alejandro found himself drawn to Carla's warmth and intelligence. She listened without judgment as he opened up about the divorce, offering support without pushing for more than he was ready to give. Weeks turned into months. Alejandro and Adam settled into a new rhythm, their bond stronger for having weathered the storm together. Regular therapy sessions with Aunt Joanna helped Adam process his feelings about the divorce and his mother's betrayal. Heather, desperate to salvage her relationship with her son, resorted to increasingly manipulative tactics. She showered Adam with gifts, made grand promises, and even attempted to turn him against Alejandro. After one particularly fraught visitation, Adam climbed into Alejandro's car, his young face troubled. "Mom says you turned everyone against her," he said quietly. "That you're the reason she lost her job and can't see me more." Alejandro's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but he kept his voice calm. "What do you think about that, buddy?" Adam was quiet for a long moment. Then, with a wisdom beyond his years, he said, "I think Mom's still lying. She made her choices. You just told the truth." Alejandro felt a surge of pride and love for his son. "That's right, Adam. Sometimes the truth is hard, but it's always better than a lie." From that day on, Adam began to distance himself from Heather, seeing through her attempts at manipulation. It hurt Alejandro to see his son have to make such adult decisions, but he knew it was necessary for Adam's emotional well-being. As summer turned to fall, Alejandro found himself spending more time with Carla. Their relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. Carla understood the importance of Adam's well-being and never pushed to be more than Alejandro was ready for. One crisp autumn evening, as they walked through the park after dinner, Carla turned to Alejandro. "I've been offered a position on the West Coast," she said. "It's a great opportunity, but I'm not sure I want to leave." Alejandro felt a pang of fear, followed by a surprising surge of hope. "What would make you want to stay?" he asked softly. Carla met his gaze, her eyes warm. "You and Adam. If you'll have me." Alejandro took her hand, a smile spreading across his face. "I think we'd like that very much." The culmination of Alejandro's professional and personal journey came on a chilly winter evening. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as he took the stage to accept an award for his flood control project. As he gazed out at the crowd, he spotted Adam in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside him sat Carla, her encouraging smile a balm to his soul. And there, in the back of the room, stood Heather. She'd lost weight, her once designer outfit now shabby and ill-fitting. Her eyes met Alejandro's, a mixture of bitterness and regret evident in her gaze. For a moment, Alejandro felt a flicker of pity. Then he turned back to the podium, focusing on the future he'd fought so hard to secure. "Thank you for this honor," he began. "This project was born of a desire to protect our communities from natural disasters. But along the way, I learned that the most important thing we can build is not a dam or a levee, but a foundation of integrity and resilience in our personal lives." As applause filled the auditorium, Alejandro felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. Through intelligence, patience, and unwavering resolve, he had not only survived betrayal but emerged stronger. With Adam by his side and Carla in his life, he faced the future with hope and determination. Epilogue. 5 years had passed since the dust settled on the Joyce divorce. The consequences of betrayal had rippled through lives, reshaping destinies with the inexorable force of a flood. Heather Joyce, once the picture of corporate success, now worked as a checkout clerk at a discount store in a small town 3 states away. Her designer wardrobe had long since been sold off to pay legal fees and back taxes. The woman who once sneered at bargain hunters now watched the clock, counting the minutes until her shift ended. She tried to rebuild her career, but doors slammed shut at the mention of her name. The scarlet letter of adultery and fraud followed her like a shadow. Her affair with Blake had cost her everything: her job, her reputation, and worst of all, her relationship with Adam. Despite her best efforts to manipulate and cajole, Adam had chosen to severely limit contact. Their interactions were now restricted to stilted monthly phone calls and the occasional supervised visit. Each time, Heather was struck by how much her son had grown, how little she knew him now. The distance between them was more than geographical. Blake Kelly hadn't fared much better. The man who once swaggered through corporate hallways now hustled as a used car salesman in a rundown lot off the interstate. His charm, once an asset, now felt hollow as he tried to push rust buckets onto desperate buyers. He'd attempted to reconcile with his wife, but she'd seen through his protests of temporary insanity. The divorce had been quick and brutal, leaving Blake with little more than the clothes on his back and a mountain of debt. Occasionally, Blake and Heather would connect on social media, exchanging bitter messages about the unfairness of it all. But these exchanges always left them feeling emptier, reminders of how far they'd fallen and how much they'd lost. Meanwhile, Alejandro Joyce's life had taken a decidedly different trajectory. The flood control project that had been his lifeline during the darkest days of his marriage had spawned a series of innovations. He was now recognized as a leading expert in urban water management, his services sought after by cities around the world. But it was his personal life that gave him the most satisfaction. His relationship with Carla had blossomed into a strong, loving partnership. They'd married in a small ceremony 2 years after the divorce, with Adam proudly serving as best man. Carla had seamlessly integrated into their lives, her warmth and patience winning Adam's trust and affection. She never tried to replace Heather, instead carving out her own unique role in the family dynamic. Her support had been invaluable as Adam navigated the choppy waters of adolescence. Adam, now 15, had grown into a thoughtful, resilient young man. The trauma of his parents' divorce had left its mark, but with the help of therapy and the unwavering support of his father and Carla, he'd emerged stronger. He excelled in school, showing a particular aptitude for environmental science, a fact that filled Alejandro with quiet pride. Joanna, Alejandro's sister, had become a vital part of their expanded family unit. Her expertise as a child psychologist had been crucial in helping Adam process his feelings about the divorce and his mother's betrayal. Sunday dinners at Joanna's house became a cherished tradition, filled with laughter and the warm glow of familial love. Casey Hopkins, the friend whose warning had set everything in motion, remained a steadfast presence in Alejandro's life. He'd been best man at the wedding and was now Adam's godfather. The bond forged in that moment of painful truth had strengthened into an unshakable friendship. Guillermo Potts, the shrewd attorney who had guided Alejandro through the legal minefield of his divorce, had become more than just a lawyer. He was now a trusted advisor and friend. Alejandro had recommended him to others going through similar ordeals, and Guillermo's practice had flourished as a result. Even Mrs. Thompson, Adam's former math teacher whose testimony had been so crucial in the custody hearing, remained in touch. She'd retired the previous year, but still tutored Adam occasionally, marveling at the young man he was becoming. As for Bridget Hawthorne, Heather's cutthroat attorney, her aggressive tactics in the Joyce divorce had backfired spectacularly. The exposure of her clients' lies had damaged her credibility, and her practice had suffered. She'd since shifted her focus to corporate law, finding that boardroom battles were less likely to blow up in her face than acrimonious divorces. On a warm spring evening, Alejandro stood in the backyard of their new home, watching as Adam and Carla set up for a barbecue. The sound of their easy laughter floated on the breeze, a testament to the healing power of time and love. His phone buzzed, a text from Casey confirming he was on his way. Joanna's car pulled into the driveway, laden with homemade desserts. As twilight deepened, Alejandro felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead been the catalyst for a richer, more authentic life. He had lost a wife, but gained a true partner. His relationship with Adam, tested by fire, had emerged stronger and deeper. And he had built a career based on protecting others from disaster, a fitting metaphor for his personal journey. As he joined his family and friends, raising a glass and a toast to good company and better days ahead, Alejandro Joyce knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wouldn't change a single moment of the path that had led him here. The storm had long passed, and in its wake, he had built something beautiful and enduring.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.